name is Andrés Vasconez. I am student at Universidad Técnica de Ambato. I study business administration. It's a very important to have a knowledge of mathematics calculation in the supply chain of a factory that is why several methods are used that is why we'll talk about adding planning. Aggregate planning. Planning is a process whose main objectives is to determine a strategy in advance that allows production requirements to be satisfied, improving and increasing the resource of the production system. Aggregate planning addresses the determination of the workforce, production quantity, environment level and external capacitation while the objectives of the satisfying the requirements for a medium term planning horizon the 6 or 18 months. What is the calic aggregate planning? Planning is a carried out a medium term time horizons and is a canal as aggregate because it does not break down on detail production quantity but their considered products family. Likewise, the system retros are considered in the resource family. So, for example, the planning time is no detail at the work order levels, but is planned at the time periods to make up a horizon temperance, medium term planning. This planning, while later be disaggregated in the master production plans and in the short-term planning or workshop workshop planning. In the hierarchical planning is a ambient of course. A consideration on the aggregate plan. When preparing an aggregate plan, it must be taken into account that there are a series of economic, commercial, technological, and the overall social or behavioral consideration that the field in the affect the strategy likewise. The decisions, variables, and the considerate for planning must be considered. The efficiency of the plan depends to the large extent to quality of the information collected, which is why it is necessary to choose the deployment aggregate plan or standardized process. Economic consideration. In aggregate planning, the economic calculation on considerate of minimal the cost which interest implies maximum the benefit. Therefore are the factors of the affect costs must considerate which the plan workforce wide lab use outsourcing inventory in destroyed or storage commercial and other consideration. Delivery times and the terms, several levels, learning curves, production narratives, decisions variables, levels or workforce, international and external production level, working hours normal and extra, inventory levels and policies, aggregate planning methods. As is known, the main objectives of planning is to balance the requirement and production recourse. Aggregate planning starts for a forecast of the future on requirements, and you can choose taking into account your resources, weather, and the actual capacity of demand. Stability is the balance at the alternatives track of capacity. These alternatives can as adaptation seek the establish enhance a decision at the capacity of the demands. These actions may include adjusting work phase or variety the workforce, implementing forecast, inventory, subcontractation or accumulation orders, alternatives that demand. These alternatives can all arbitrarily seek the stability, commercialization, accession, the adjust demand of the capacity of the company. There are several methods used on the creating and the aggregate plan among which leader production, set decision rulers, objectives, programming of dynamic programming or heuristic methods. Stand ordained the module will study some of the most heuristic methods. However, is a word classified that the as main of possibility combination of adjusted that can be made on the system. Per production requirements. The first stage is create an aggregate plan is the determination on production requirements. These requirements are basically after by three factors: forecast of demand, initial inventory of the util added, exhaustive inventory for mathematical calculation. There are several methods for aggregate planning. There are four methods. The first method, aggregate plan, variable workforce aggregate. The second method, float constant for force wide, inventory and missing aggregate. A tercer method, missing aggregate, minimum laboral force, subcontractation. The four methods, advanced warfare over time. Aggregate plan variable workforce is this strategy considers the possibility of the adjusting the workforce, the perfectly handling demand while production. Turn wrong right and the fight terror folks, it is vital to perform the most accurate calculation of the cost of free and freight. In the practice, the learning curve of the age new operator will have to consider for the reason of the strategy that can be inconvenient in times the requirements certainly the rates of specialization. The first step the deployment plan is considering what the company labor based in the number of works requirement for month moves the calculation taking into account planning requirements. Aggregate plan constant workforce while inventories and missing. This strategy considers the possibility of the establishes constants regarding the numbers of the employees while remain unchanged during the deployment of the plan obviously since the number of workers is constant and the requirements are variable. There will be periods in which more or less the quantity demand is produced. The question what do you eat those periods? There are many ones these periods, for example overtime, outsourcing, etc. Of simple managers, inventory storage in the case will the use inventories and storage. Aggregates playing minimum laboral forces while subcontractation. The minimum workforce strategy is adaptive type plan which considers adjusting on the workforce to the minimal demands on production. Requirement. This has two implications. The first that there will be no interval. The second that the workforce will not be able to meet the requirements in this case, as has must the considerate either on capacity on the demand. On of acoustic methods on capacity is on considerate probability on outsourcing as will see in this is this aggregate plan advanced labor force overtime. The average workforce strategy in adapting plan that considers managing and eventual number of operates and therefore the fact that there will be periods in which more or less the quality of demand is produced is assumed on intake. One, the accused measures on the capacities to consider the possibility of the converting the missing units by production after hours. Thanks. Thanks.
For the example, we will use the aggregate plan method minimum laboral force wide subcontracting. We have periods, production requirements, work days, available time, real production, who needs to subcontract, outsourcing cost, and normal time cost. The first step is to determine the minimum workforce, that is the constant number of workers that we will have in our plan. In our example, it could be number of workers 1000 for 5 for 6 divided for 125 for 8. The minimum number of workers is 30. For the first period of our example, it will be available time is 22 for 8 for 30 workers. Available time is 5280. Since we can know the start progressive time, we can calculate to actual production for this month. Actual production is 518 divided for 5. Actual production is 1056. The next step is to determine the missing units, in this case units to subcontractate. For example, units to be subcontracted is 2500 less 1056. Units to be subcontracted is 1444. For example, for plan cost is 515,000, and the total cost of the plan equals is 518,500. Thanks.